The Unseen, and today I want to talk to you about gatekeepers. Alright, so today we're talking about gatekeepers, and this has a whole lot of teaching I could go into, but obviously this isn't the place to go into everything, so I'm not going to. Maybe another time, another place. And I'll give you some context for maybe you to do your own study, because it's actually a really cool study, and I'll get into that a little. But gatekeepers might be a strange term that you're not familiar with scripturally. It actually shows up depends on your translation really, but you might be familiar with the word porter, and it's like Old Testament. I think it shows up in the Old Testament. I'm not sure if it shows up in the New. But you hear about porters a lot, which is another word for gatekeeper. And so I like to use the word gatekeeper because it just connects more with our language. So gatekeepers, and they show up in a number of books. There's probably a bunch more, so I'm not going to cover all of them. But primarily you see a lot of it in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. You see it in Numbers, I believe, and Nehemiah. It shows up a bit. Those are like the primary ones that I'm familiar with, at least. It might show up in a few other spots, but so look that up. Read the whole books literally, because there's so much good stuff in it, and it gets into a lot of this. So porters or gatekeepers, just give you a quick mini teaching on it. They were a part of the tribe of Levi. So the Levites were familiar with them as the priests, but every Levite wasn't a priest. So every priest was a Levite at this time, but every Levite wasn't a priest. So it might take you a second to piece that out. So there were different families essentially within the tribe of Levi, that they were assigned different jobs that weren't part of the priesthood. So the gatekeepers were actually a group of people that what they did, they had a number of jobs, and this is part of what's a really cool study that I'm not going to go into right now. So I would encourage you to study this out because it's actually really powerful. But the gatekeepers had a number of jobs, and it was all about like the temple and the tabernacle, depending on which time they were in. And they were in charge of keeping the gates, of watching over the gates, and they had a pretty intense responsibility. They had to always be on watch. So where this applies and what we're getting to with the unseen, I have just some cool like stories to share with some of the practice I've had that comes out of this. But just one scripture reference is 2 Chronicles 23:19. And it says this, and he set gatekeepers at the gates of the house of the Lord, that none which was unclean in any way should enter in. So this is a big responsibility. God had set up with the tabernacle and the temple, he had set up a lot of standards, really, rules, standards. And the gatekeepers were in charge, essentially, of making sure that those rules were followed. So like an example would be like someone with leprosy would not be coming into the tabernacle, just a basic thing. People that weren't of the tribe of Israel or of those people, like they would not be allowed in. So like these were people that did not belong. And there's a number of other things, but just as a basic sense of they were in charge of like if something didn't belong or a type of people did not belong, they kept that out. And it was because that place, well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go into, I could keep going. But essentially like only the Jews, the Israel, like they were the only ones allowed into this place. So anyone else is a big no. And then there were lots of other things. And then there was also like the elements and the things that belonged in the temple that they would have to import. like spices and just all oil, flour, all the different things that were a part of the priestly duties with the temple and their worship. So they were in charge of getting all that stuff in, and there's a lot of stuff there. But just to give you like a sneak peek, if you do a study, the beautiful thing, which is just what's so crazy powerful, is all of those things are Jesus. Like they represent Jesus. They speak of him. And which is really the whole tabernacle, like everything in it. Like it speaks of Jesus, the way God had given instruction for all to be designed. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to keep going. I don't want to keep going on this one. So just do a study on gatekeeping and what they did and the porters. So they had to keep out that nothing that was unclean could enter in. So that's Second Chronicles 23:19. So there was like a really sense of big responsibility to this. Now we know practically, you're probably familiar with this, Proverbs 4:23. This is more the practical application of us. So like you get into the temple and how we are inhabited by the Spirit of God now. And so now he doesn't need the tabernacle or the temple and that whole situation. So now we carry his Spirit. And so we are like, our bodies are like his temple, And in that way, like, so Proverbs 4:23 says this. This is the most direct application to being a gatekeeper. Keep your heart with all diligence, or depending on your translation, it would say guard your heart. So let's just say guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. So this speaks directly to each of us, like that we are to be the gatekeepers of our heart, of our inner being, our inner man or woman. And like this is our duty. Like it's not a light thing to consider the fact that we are physical containers somehow. This is just the beautiful mystery. Somehow that we contain the Spirit of God. And that he has designed things, that his desire was to come inhabit us. Like how powerful is that? So there's actually a high responsibility, just like the gatekeepers with the tabernacle, of keeping things right and in order the way it was designed, because the temple contained the presence of God, and this was no small thing. So that's just a basic teaching of gatekeeping or gatekeepers. And this is just some of the cool story I want to tell you, and then we'll be done. And there'll actually be another part, I'll explain it. But Encounter Nights is something me and my wife started a year and a half ago. We've been doing it for over a year now. And Encounter Nights really just were designed as like a place of just pure worship. That was our whole desire. Everything that we wanted to see it be was just a place of pure worship, where our goal every time we came together, and some of you watching some of you have been there, so you know this, that our goal is to minister to the Lord with no motives, where we're not expecting anything of him. We're not worshiping him to get something or to get anywhere. And now we all know that this is right and true just always, but oftentimes there's other things going on and this and that. So Encounter Night was really just, because we're still doing it, Encounter Night was just like a time where we come together just to worship him and be in his presence, whatever he wanted to do, that we gave him permission to do. And we've had some really, really powerful nights. Anyway. One of the things that we discovered as time went on was we'd have these nights that were really powerful. And then we'd have times where it was kind of like it was okay, and it was good. There was nothing wrong, but it just didn't seem to like have that same depth of presence. And it wasn't about the demonstration of things and judging it by that. It was just the sense of like, we'd have times where like his presence came and rested and it was powerful. And then there were times where it just didn't seem to really get there. And it's not about judging each and every individual experience, but I began to like consider like, so what's the difference? And he gave me this idea. I had a bit of a vision, which it kind of led me to this point and then to study this. But what I started doing, so for me being at this time, me and my wife, the only leaders of Encounter Nights, what I would do before every time is I would walk the room, and I still do this. I walk the room and I take authority over the night. And I just, whatever God's shown us, I speak to those things directly, and I take authority, like with my presence and being the one who is leading the night. Like I have authority over the service, if you want to call it that. I take authority over it and I speak to things directly. And mostly that's just releasing heaven and releasing what God has said about that night, if there's anything specific. And so I do that. Then this is the other cool thing. So this is a shout out to the prophetic team, which is a part of Encounter Nights. We have a prophetic team that's just, they've been operating for a little while now, and it's a growing, building thing. So it's powerful. If that interests you and you haven't known how to connect in that way, just let me know in the comments and it can point you in the right direction. But the prophetic team, something that I saw as like kind of one of their assignments for Encounter Nights is that we would have two people be gatekeepers of the night. So as the leader of the night, I take authority over it, right? That's the primary thing. But then we have two people on the prophetic team. They are the gatekeepers. And so what they do is really what we read in 2 Chronicles, where the goal is, now this doesn't apply to people, but the goal is they go stand at the main entrance point where everyone comes in because all the other doors are locked. But the main entrance point of the auditorium, they stand there and, they're kind of saying hi to people maybe, but mostly they're just praying and just like speaking out what God's giving them to release and speak out or take authority over. And when they do that, the cool thing is our goal is, which we've talked about in past videos on the unseen, is like that raising your awareness of the Spirit. And so this is the cool thing that I want to share is in this practice that we've begun doing this, and we've been doing it for a while now, the gatekeeping. We've had on the prophetic team, many people talk about the angels that show up, as well as just the things happening in the Spirit that they become aware of, specifically with the gatekeeping. So I'll give you a couple examples. And hopefully this will just stir your hunger to kind of go down this path of being more aware of what heaven is doing and what God's doing at any given time. So we've had repeated times, I think we have, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go too far on this. This will just make the video really long. But we've had repeated times where these two angels show up on either side of the door facing inward, like towards the stage. Generally, I believe. That's the report I get mostly. And sometimes they're holding different things, but the best approximation of what it looks like is they're very big. They're like bigger than normal sized people. They're like large. And Roman probably wouldn't be the correct thing, but it's almost like that kind of like Roman soldier guard kind of feel and look. So they show up there and it's like they are guarding. So there's been times where we haven't been aware of them, but ever since I started doing this practice with the taking authority over the space, as well as the prophetic team's involvement, we've had multiple times where these angels show up and they are guarding. And so the whole point, and this is what the gatekeepers did, which is what I believe is so powerful, it's honoring, and rightly so, honoring and valuing God's presence that is there to do what he's planning to do. Like whether it's angelic activity and just stuff like the heavenly spirit realm and stuff going on and stirring up, and then the Lord himself being there. There are things that he's prepared and wants to do, and we do this intentional thing where we are standing in a place where we are saying like no unclean thing can enter here, and we are honoring his presence, his glory that is there to do stuff, and to encounter us, and for us to encounter him. And so that's really what the point of it is. And now, just to give a little clarity, that's not about people. Like, we're not judging people as they walk in, but people can be carrying things. And we can talk further into that in the future maybe, but in other videos. But people can be carrying things, and what the cool thing is so to talk about those angels again. We've had times where they're guarding the presence, basically. And people will walk in, and our prophetic team, the gatekeepers that are there, like, pressing in and praying into what's going on, they've been aware. And this has happened a couple times in different ways. I'll just give you one example, because it rarely looks the same. But where, like, say the one time they were very aware that these two angelic guards were holding these spears, and from the spear tips was like this pulsating vibration thing, and everyone that walked in, whatever they were carrying, and that doesn't mean demonic, we're not talking, I mean, it can, but it doesn't automatically mean that. It could just be burdens and things that they were carrying in that just don't belong on them, because that's not who God created anyone to be, right? And as they walked in, they were aware that the spears that these angels were holding, the pulsating was almost like a magnet, where, like, as they walked past and came into the room, that, like, pulsating, like, and they were, like, seeing things flying off the people, like they couldn't go in with them. So that's just cool, right? So that's one example. And this was like a double confirmation of the two gatekeepers. We had been praying into, like, just the sweetness of his presence, and so what's obviously connected with sweetness is honey. So we were just praying like honey of heaven, and if that sounds weird to you, I'm sorry. But, like, just releasing, like, that the honey of heaven would just be thick in the room, like, full of his presence and, like, the sweetness of Jesus. And so what they had shared afterwards is one person didn't see anything. They weren't personally aware of what was going on, but they just felt like when you walked into the room that there was just like a thickness, but in a good way. There was like a thickness to the air, and it just felt good. Like, it was just good, and you didn't want to leave that. And, like, they noticed a difference in the air. And another person said that they saw like a waterfall. It was like almost like a honey waterfall at the doorways. So as people walked in, they were walking into like this waterfall of honey in the spirit. So those are just a couple examples. That was just to kind of stir your interest maybe, or hunger to, like, just like, let's be aware of what's going on in the spirit. And there's so much cool stuff that we actually have influence over, and sometimes authority over and into. And there's so much cool stuff that, like, you can interact with and just see what heaven's doing and actually be aware of the part you play in seeing things happen, which often is a very big part, because he's given us authority to do stuff, to do what he's asked us to do. So that's gatekeeping. That was just kind of a general, wanted to share a little bit on that. Next week, we are going to talk about how to activate you being a gatekeeper. So activate your gatekeeping. We're going to talk about that next week. And so join me next week. It's going to be good. I got some more stuff to share with you on that. Let's get hungry to be aware of the unseen realm, because there is so much going on that God is doing, and it's worth paying attention to. So thank you for joining me. Have a good day.